Hi, my name's Chris. I wanted to spend a few moments telling you about my experience here at Molland Spinal Care over the years. I want to specifically focus on my son, because I first came here, I brought my son several years back, and my son's story started out probably as a standard story of a concussion. He suffered a blow to the head. After getting hit in the head, he had headaches and dizziness and the basic signs of a concussion. I took him to his doctor, and the doctor did suggest he probably had a concussion. He recommended a pediatric neurologist. We went there, and the pediatric neurologist confirmed that my son Christopher did indeed suffer a concussion. And we started, basic concussion protocols. But after 3 or 4 weeks of doing that, Christopher's symptoms weren't getting better. In fact, they were getting worse. Intense headaches, dizziness, and sometimes the dizziness would go into a full-on vertigo, and some very difficult cognitive fog. So from that pediatric neurologist, I went to another one, and then another one, and then another one. Eventually, one of them recommended Christopher undergo vestibular therapy. The vestibular system in the inside of the ear where we have our balance system. And so we went through that for several months, vestibular therapy. You might think of it as balance therapy. And that was tough. That really hit Christopher hard, trying to recover his balance. There were times I had to literally wheel him out in a wheelchair after trying vestibular therapy. And so that didn't work. So my wife and I began to expand our horizons, looking for help for Christopher. And we went from finding specialists north of where we lived, west of where we lived, south of where we lived. I think the furthest of far, we took a 700-mile round trip to see a specialist who had a very stellar reputation. But through all that, Christopher's symptoms continued to get worse. Again, the headaches, the cognitive fog, the vertigo. Then my wife and I, in doing our own research, we increasingly found stories of people who suffered head blows, but the head trauma also caused neck problems. And so we began to read about that, and in doing that, we eventually found Molland Spinal Care. That was almost 1.5 years into the search for answers. And like any parent seeing their son suffer, that was a tough 1.5 years. Christopher couldn't go to school. He couldn't attend school. He couldn't do any of the activities he was involved in. Life just kind of crumbled. His headaches were too intense. His vertigo was too intense. Life just stopped. And watching your child go through that is tough. But then also, looking for answers and looking for answers and looking for answers and not being able to find them. I was given answers, but when the medical doctors really couldn't help Christopher, the answers I was given were things like it's psychosomatic. I began to hear the phrase school refusal, that he just didn't want to go back to school. And I knew that not to be true of my son. So like I said, it's like 1.5 years of that process, and it was a pretty dark 1.5 years. But then we found Molland Spinal Care, and I have to say, when I came here, I'd never heard of upper cervical care before, and so I came here based on that 1.5 years experience of searching for answers. I came here with a high degree of skepticism, and one might even say a certain cynicism had set in. And the first thing that struck me when I brought Christopher here, was simply the way Dr. Zach communicated with me. It was a combination of knowledge with humility. He didn't pretend to know everything. He knew what he could do, and he knew after examining Christopher that he could help Christopher. But that combination of knowledge and humility really struck me, because I had been to so many doctors who presented themselves as knowing everything there is to know. And again, when the doctors ran out of real answers, they resorted to the things like psychosomatic and those types of diagnoses. And Christopher was prescribed antidepressants, all this kind of stuff. And when I brought Christopher here, Dr. Zach was so patient with him, so patient. Christopher's spine at the time was almost like he was like a wet noodle. So part of the process of examining him here is standing straight, sitting straight, so the spine can be examined. And Christopher really struggled with that. He just couldn't stand straight, he couldn't sit up straight, and his headaches were intense, and Dr. Zach was so patient. And we got through that examination, then Dr. Zach indicated that he could help Christopher. That was a couple years ago now. And if I could show you the way he is now, the way my son is now, you wouldn't believe he's the person I described going through these 18 months. Because now he's back on track. His life is back. He stands straight, he sits straight. His headaches are gone. His dizziness, his vertigo is gone. The cognitive fog is gone. The whole process, obviously it was most difficult for my son. It was difficult for my wife and me, and it was difficult for my parents. Them watching Christopher go through this really took a toll on them. And to this day, Dr. Zach is known within my extended family, in communicating with my parents and communicating with my brothers. Dr. Zach is simply known as the neck guy. The neck guy was able to get Christopher's life back. The neck guy was. So for you out there who, either for yourself or are in pain, or maybe you have a child who's in pain, and maybe you've never heard of upper cervical care before. Maybe like me, you're skeptical. All I can say is, it takes one visit to give it a chance. And that one visit several years ago, it completely turned my son's life around. So just wanted to take a few moments to just share that story with you, and anyone out there watching or listening can make of it what you want to. But like I said, if you're thinking about it, or even if you're skeptical of upper cervical care, give it a shot. In my experience, it's worked wonders for my son.